Well, hello there. It's time for Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, 3M3, Luke Confronts Jabba. Music by John Williams, orchestrated by Gordon Langford. And here we are. It's a pretty confusing cue because of the various edits and cuts and things like that. So around this area, just sort of on this sort of gap, basically, at this bar, so that's bar 23, it inserts all the music from bars 63 to 71 from the previous cue, 3M2, the Big Thaw, and then it segues back into the original cue with this sort of chromatic gestural melody in the tuba, which it does, and then it actually goes to the film version. Then actually cuts to 12M3 More Duel, which is this bit here, which is just a simple sort of bass line, really. With cellos, bassoons, double bass, contra, ARP, synth, and organ, which is just happens to be in the wrong key because it goes from D flat to C sharp, I suppose. Yeah, it's nice there, but actually originally it went to C pedal here, and then lots of sort of rather extreme dissonances over the top of it. So the film version, so what I'm going to play is kind of what is on the soundtrack motion picture thing rather than the actual film. So the actual film will just cut straight to this. So I've put the music for that there. There's not much point in sort of highlighting it because it's only sort of a few bars of with a sort of a small hint of that almost sort of hackneyed cliche vaudeville sort of that sort of idea right at the very end, which is sort of a bit of an emperor sort of connotation, I guess, but anyway, obviously just there to fill space by the editing team. So what's also confusing is that again it's a sort of very ambiguous tonality, and a lot of the time we just have sort of single line melody that doesn't really belong to any specific, or at least I can't discern any sort of specific key or mode or octatonicism or anything like that particularly. And even intervallically, it's quite obscure because there's no real relation between, let's say, this shape and that shape, and other things like that. So I suppose there are some sort of spidery things going on here. But here it's not really the same as like that. It's just sort of rather different. And it goes in different directions. I suppose the fact that they're quintuplets is about the only similarity with it. But, he does that a lot anyway. Then we've got this sort of slightly Jabba-esque type of sort of tuba, like that sort of thing. These little motifs, this little sort of free-floating particles, as it were. And quite obscure chord structures as well, which don't really seem to have much relation between each other as well. They're not really part of an octatonic thing or anything. So how do we sort of analyze it? And it's a good question. It's ambiguous. I'll just say it is ambiguous. I suppose there are other things which are interesting. So we got a non-leitmotivic theme here. So it does sort of have a diminished seventh shape, but then it does something different right at the end with other different notes as well. So he's quite careful to kind of avoid repetition in this particular thing. And then we've got another chord complex here in the flute. Like that, which is actually a subset of the third mode of limited transposition, but I think that's sort of completely accidental. I don't think that's part of anything particularly. The original harp, which was with the flute, which would have sounded like this, on the piano at least, has been cut, possibly because it interfered with what the flute was doing at that particular point. And then we've got all of these sort of little fluttery bits going on as well. So we've got a sort of interesting quartal, quintal type sort of string sonority here. And I think I'd prefer to just simply call it a sonority rather than a specific chord. So we've got that going on, and this going up to a G and a D, so I didn't quite play the right notes. And at the same time, we've also got that as well. So we've got very, very extreme sort of tonality at that point as well. So as you can see, that's sort of, 5/4, that's pan-diatonic 4/22, this is 4/8, all sorts of different things going on at the same time. But they don't seem to kind of relate to each other at all. And I think he's been quite careful to kind of make sure that that is the case, apart from the fact that, if you have a bass line, obviously it's a D pedal based chord, and you can kind of do it whatever you want over the top of it. It's still D based. But then there's a semitonal shift down to D flat, and in fact we've got a sort of D flat minor, like that sort of thing with a pedal D flat. Interestingly, careful to put that in the tuba and nothing else doubling that, because otherwise it would obscure that tuba line a little bit, because it's very, very close in pitch to the cellos and bassoons at that point. Then we've got sort of, this sort of spidery thing there, which is sort of a C flat minor with a flat 6, not flat 9, flat 6. Which is quite interesting here. And then we've got another sort of chord complex like that, which I'm sure I've heard that before. That just seems to remind me of something. And I can't remember what it is, but I know it's from somewhere. It could be Harry Potter, I don't know. Obviously written way before then. But I wonder whether that's a spidery thing that kind of, he's always had in mind. Not sure. It's sort of an interesting thing if you think about the way that a child moves their fingers to donate a spider. It's got that sort of spidery outline to it. So then we're into more of the sort of quartal, quintal type stuff. I haven't even bothered analysing that particular chord, because I sort of think it sort of gave up at that point. There is one thing which is interesting, which is that this is an octatonic trombone, octatonic strings line with trombones, which is also octatonic as well. So if you extract them together, we've got sort of octatonic T2, so I'll put that in as well. So in other words, an octatonic scale, semitone, tone, semitone, tone, starting on D. But it's not D-based particularly, although the trombones do actually start on D. But then we've got sort of other things going on as well, which is not part of that, because we've got that going on, and I think that's the anomalous note in that particular bit, which he does tend to do somewhat, so he does disguise these things. Anyway, so we've got that with nice little swiped gongs effects as well, and then we've got a really interesting chord complex here, which is really fascinating. So if we sort of try and take it apart, we've got a chord complex where you've got a harp B, which doesn't appear anywhere in the strings, which is really unusual. So it is not doubling that B, it's very subtle, and indeed there's no B around that area either here, like that, and then it just builds up from that B in thirds, and then just skips a bit, and then goes. So you've got this sort of extraordinary chord like that, which is really weird. In amongst all of that, we've got other chord complexes where we've got sort of B half dim 7, going to E flat minor as a trill, then back to B half dim 7, but at the same time as having, C sus sharp 4, and then it goes to a sort of D flat augmented chord, then an add 4, all at the same time. So if I play it at the piano, it sounds absolutely bonkers. With a sort of stupid shaker sound as well. Yeah, obviously absolutely ridiculous. For some very strange reason, I seem to have managed to get rid of my full score of this, which was a bit strange. So I'll open it up again. And let's see whether we can go to the relevant bit. So it's here, I think. Let me just double check that. So we're in bar 16 at that point. So yeah, just to give you a bit of context, so this is the lead up to it. I'll just do the strings first, just so you can see that bit. Yeah, a sort of real mush. And of course, on the real recording, the tuba is actually quite prominent in that bit as well. Let me see if I can find it here on that bit. Sometimes difficult to sort of get to it. Yeah, so we're here now. That phased ARP synth. So this is the octatonic bit. That was that swipe gong. Yeah, very innocuous. But that's what's going on. There's this extraordinary sort of chord complex, which in its entirety doesn't sound particularly atonal in a strict sense of the word. It's kind of post-tonal. I've called it pan-chromaticism because I couldn't think of any other name for it, because it uses all 12 notes apart from E in the whole thing. And it must have been that he's sort of, you know, improvising the piano and sort of thought, oh, that sounds a bit of a gnarly chord. Let's use that. I haven't done that one before. Because I think sometimes he tries to think of new things to do as he's composing, and I'm sure that's one of them. But yeah, I think sort of calling it B dim 9, add sharp 5 and a dim 7, not massively helpful. At the same time as going C sus 4 and a B half dim with an E flat minor bit as well. So it's incredibly complex, but good to sort of spot. And let's hear it again if we can. And there is a hint almost of sort of, it sounds octatonic, but it isn't because of everything else going around, which is interesting. I think mainly that's because, you know, you've got the half dim chords here. So there is an element of that there inherently in kind of some of the subsets that are going on. And then we've got sort of pan-diatonicism here, where they're kind of, you know, basically white notes in that bar. We've got a sort of C sus 2, sus 4, like that. Which reminds me of the composer Nicholas Moore, a rather obscure reference for you, a British composer but living in the States for many years, who died, well, probably over 10 years ago now. But he wrote those sorts of chords. The violin concerto particularly is a fantastic work if you don't know it. So I digress. Anyway, we then get into some really ambiguous territory after that moment with these bassoons. There's also some, I've noticed there's also some fluttering going on here, but I can't work out whether that's part of the synth line or something else, which is a bit strange. So I don't know whether I've made an error on that one and kind of missed out stuff, which I think I have. But it doesn't, it seems that actually kind of continues rather than going into those semi-breves at that point. I think that's probably what's going on. So it could have been that they actually, you know, continue at that point rather than sort of fluff out, because I'm hearing a bit of that going on. Yeah, I'm definitely hearing that sort of fluffy type of sound at that point as well. So I could have made some errors at that point. So I will double check it. And so when I upload the video, I will have double checked it against sort of all relevant sources, and kind of make a decision based upon that. But I suspect that is still going on as we enter this, because it just doesn't that doesn't sound right to me. I don't think I can hear those notes. Yeah, and I'm also getting a sort of fluttering G and A flat going on as well. Could just be my imagination, but I'm pretty sure I hear that in the recording. Yeah, there's definitely sort of some other ornamentation that's going on at that point as well. Anyway, let's move on, because it's sort of not massively relevant really, but we'll sort that out. So it's ambiguous here because of the dyads. Muted horns and bassoons and things. Now, at this point, it actually goes into the measures 63 to 71 from 3M2, which was the previous cue that we've done. So that's, you know, confusing as well. So let's go into that. 3M2, where are we? 3M2. So you can sort of look at it in situ, because I kind of, you know, did that. Where are we? Yeah. So it's going to come in at that point. So let's get rid of that. So I'm just sort of fast forwarding, going back. So it's still there, and it happens on that bar line. So actually it's 60. So this is from 3M to X2. So that's the bass clarinets and bassoons. Then back to here. So they've elided those notes. So again, more ambiguous dyads. So this is the original cue coming up, so not in the film. More clusters. So weirdly, all notes of G harmonic minor at that point. Notice the flute plays a C sharp. With the bass drum. So that's the original cue, which never got used. They went straight to the 12 and 3 More Duel at that point, for some reason. So yeah, just sort of fun anomaly where the second flute plays the wrong note. It should be a D sharp. It's just the same thing. It doesn't need that C sharp. But they left it in. They probably thought, oh, that's quite nice. Let's leave that in. And then it wasn't used anyway. Yes, I mean, again, it's sort of more ambiguity, more pedals. You know, there's a lot of pedal work going on, sustained chords, and then we've got these sort of interesting little clusters. That sort of major minor dyad, in other words, a minor third and a major third at the same time. So it's Mark Richards's famous 0811, but here it's not in that sort of voicing. So we have that at the same time. Sort of very chromatic gestural melody that we had before. Nice sort of portamentos sort of going from the cellos all the way up there, where we get sort of an interesting sort of chord complex again. Sorry, like that. Going to there. So again, it's interestingly here, it's actually whole tone. Like that. It's just because of the voicing. Weirdly, we don't sort of notice it as such, and you even get the C there a bit later on. Admittedly, there is still some of that going on at the same time, so it's a little bit disguised. And then we have more ambiguous dyads at that point. The new material, or rather the original material, is sort of C pedal, but with extreme dissonance going on here. You know, more of those sort of block chordal minor triads at that point, and this sort of, you know, sort of atonal sort of gestures. Then we got this sort of idea here. You know, which is basically, interestingly enough, all the notes of G harmonic minor working together. So if we extrapolate all of those notes, where's the D? E flat. There we go. Isn't that sort of bizarre? So sort of G harmonic minor, but it just doesn't sound like one, especially when I play it on the piano. Listen to this. Yeah, it's just sort of mad. And then it goes up a tone as well, and then it goes to this sort of F sharp 7 flat 9 13 and a C sharp as well, but very, very chromatic, hence the low number on the right with 3 notes here as well. So here we've got that going on. It sounds quite octatonic, but actually weirdly when I did it, I don't think it turned out to be. So that would be octatonic, but it has F sharp if it's that. So here, that I don't think that quite works either. There was something else about that, but that's octatonic 1. Let's have a quick look actually. So those do work. Ah, yeah, it is actually octatonic 1. So there we go. I spotted one. T0. So an untransposed octatonic chord complex. And then this isn't, because it goes to that minor second area as well. Just so you know, almost octatonic, this whole thing, but not quite. It's actually 0, 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10. Almost octatonic T1, but just not quite. So yeah, because it has that extra C natural, like that. So we've got that going on as well. So a slightly confusing cue in many respects, and particularly these sort of gestural things. There's a lot going on, you know, in that bar 7. There's huge amounts of, you know, quite thick orchestration in terms of, you know, what's playing at any one point. You know, we've got the bass line there. That's replicated with the ARP synth. Sorry, I keep pressing the wrong button. We got trombone there. Sorry, tuba. I don't think anything else is playing. So we've got that going on in the bass. Yeah. So over the top of that, we've got this other bit of harmony, which is all here. Like that. Which, as I said before, is not a specific sort of thing. It's just lots of different, you know, chord complexes, which are basically chromatic. pretty much all the way through. We've got interesting harmon mutes on the trombones. I don't think Note Perform will play those at all well, but let's give it a go. Like that. They did, but they didn't have any of the sort of right nuance there. That should be... Whoops. Stop playing. That should be a sort of crescendo at that point as well. What else have we got? Yeah, just lots of separation of sounds, really. And especially when we go into that bar 16 stuff, I'm pretty sure that is kind of, going on at that point. It's a really confusing little bit of oral dictation, that bit. Yeah. You know what? Maybe not. It's just the way it sounds. It could just be a little bit of vibrato. I'm just hearing an A flat, but that just could be a harmonic frequency, given what's going on, because there's an A flat there in the tuba. So it could be a resonance from that, because there's no A flat here. It's all diatonic, but it just doesn't sound... That doesn't sound right to me. It could just be... And this is the problem with oral dictation, is that sometimes your ears can deceive you. You need to use the force, I guess. Anyway, but that is basically it. The rest of it has sort of similar sort of sounds going on, lots and lots of separation, quite sparse, some of it as well, these little interjections. But I do love that sort of bubbling strings, this sort of thing here, which is really interesting. And then it goes into octatonic. Yeah, and it's very minor orientated as well at that point, but very, very effective. And I love this stuff here, where we have quite an interesting voicing here, where you've got the bassoons, and then in between we've got that cor anglais. I've written it in untransposed pitch at that point. So we got those sort of really fun chords at that time. Octatonic. Then it plays a C sharp by mistake, which is very noticeable when you do it, and exactly the same here. Let's see whether we can actually get to it. So watch out that second flute. That's... So yeah, my ears are not deceiving me. That's definitely... That second flute's doing that. But I think it's actually written in the copy that I've got as a D sharp. But anyway, there we go. A nice sort of interesting aside at that point. A bit like the chord in The Desert from A New Hope, where I think the second oboe plays the wrong note and they left it in, and it's always been there ever since in every recording, which is interesting. So that is it for now, everybody. And we will go on to the segue, which is this, which I'm looking forward to. Yeah, good luck with that. So that should be quite fun. So that's the next one that we're going to be looking at after this. So the calm before the storm, arise the rancor, and Luke fight with each other. So more of the same next time, and looking forward to it very much. Bye for now.